All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the live stream. Josh,
Dude, we
this
haven't done a live. I looked back on this. We haven't done a live in like almost half a year.
it's
How
been a while.
crazy
It's been
is
a
that?
while, but we really, we meant to do more. It's just life has gotten a hold of us. But alas, here we are.
It's game time. I'm excited.
Yeah, so let's see. The comments section have actually drastically filled out since we started this already. What do you say we look at some of the comments just to hop into this before we even get into the actual topic?
Dang,
First of
all right.
all, there's a couple friends I do want to welcome. Brad, this is actually Brad from our M16A2 episode. Um, Brad was the Marine infantryman who got the first Marine shot in the head in Fallujah. Live to tell the tale. That's Brad. Good dude. Awesome guy. Let me see. Who else do you see?
Calvin's in the house.
Calvin. Yeah. Actually, I just called him right before right before the live stream. All right. Let's see. Are there any comments and topics that we want to? Oh, hey, Clay's here. Yeah. So, guys,
Clay here to
AK
terrorize and upset precision rifle shooters on the long
AK
range.
yokels. Yeah, setting the power setting to 1,000. I already saw the comments. I saw somewhere someone was already talking about the PSL wars.
Ah, yes. Let's start with that. It's totally off topic. We're here to talk about rifle weight, but let's talk. Should we? Oh, freaking Rob just has to go ace a course with the PSL.
Rob and I have had a very respectable disagreement. Privately between Rob and I, we've disagreed immensely about the PSL. Mine comes from the three that I've owned and sometime overseas, working with PSLs. And what I typically see is sort of what we saw. Your first cluster, if you shoot it in a cold bore, it's able to group, but then it just craps itself, and it's impossible to recover at that point unless you cool it down. But Rob did a phenomenal job shooting a replicated speedway course with the PSL just to show the boys how it's done. And I hate that Rob called it PSL wars because it's not. It's more of diplomacy than war, right?
I mean, war is just aggressive negotiations. All right.
Let's just say this: I would not take the PSL to war if I were to have a choice in that matter. But I digress. I think it's worthwhile for further discussion with Rob, though.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, look, at the end of the day, I've shot the rifles too. Like my exposure to the PSLs is the three that you've had over the course of time, all the way back to the 2008. And my experience is obviously the same as yours, right? Because we've shot the same guns. But obviously his is a shooter for sure.
Yeah. And honestly, it's an interesting topic to delve into, but that is a massive can of worms for us to dig into at this point. I mean, honestly, like it is the PSL, if they fix the accuracy, still has a plethora of issues, in my opinion. And that still doesn't fix, if it really were a legacy PSL issue, it still doesn't fix the legacy PSLs as their performance. In fact, it makes it more difficult for people to discern which is current and legacy, which has current enhancements or legacy items. Like, I think that's interesting to delve into, but this is not the forum right now. I think right now, let's see. There's even more people talking about it right now. The PSL isn't. It actually is fairly lightweight. I mean, for what it is. I do want to see if the suppressor has any dampening effect to the rifle, because I have shot really good results with precision rifles using the OSS/Huxworks can. You've seen me
Mhm.
on quite a few of my rifles. Whenever I throw the flow through on, it's not just for semi-autos and gas regulation, but it shoots cooler. I suspect because the can is fairly heavy, I suspect it has something to do with dampening it, dampening the barrel. But I mean, I can't say that for certain right now because I don't have any actual tests that I've done on it with the PSL. But that again, there's so much to it that we really ought to delve into on why we see such different results. And again, mine were done on 3 different PSLs. The one that we shot on Speedway has a KNS piston. It has the trigger upgrade to it. So I mean, even if it didn't have the trigger upgrade, I've shot enough SVDs and Mosin Nagant PUs to know that I can shoot the 54 rim with that load better. And those are my hand loads. So the accuracy is comparable, if not better, than the S&Bs. So a lot of questions, a lot of things surrounding it. Let's take our time, really mince through it, and delve through some of these things. We're working with Rob. I mean, Rob and I text each other anyway, so that's no big deal. Anyways.
All right, so let's transition into the topic at hand, which is rifle weight. Specifically, the age of the lightweight rifle, and what does that actually mean, and why are we talking about this? And we're going to go on a little bit of a journey about probably the history around where rifles have been, gone, and are returning to, right? Because everything is cyclical, my goodness. But before we get there, go ahead and make sure that you guys hit the like button. Go ahead and, as the children say, smash it. Yeah, go ahead and smash that like button. And that'll get us on our way, help the algorithm, and do all the good stuff. All right, Henry, what do you say? Game time?
Yeah, so for the convenience of the audience, we've pulled up a deck of slides
Yes.
to go through and talk about this. But Josh, I mean, lead us down this road.
So
Actually, the age of lightweight rifles, didn't that start with the M16 being deployed in Vietnam, by the way?
I mean, that was definitely the conversion, right? Where you start seeing stuff where the capability increases. We're getting ahead, Henry. You're
Okay,
getting ahead.
continue.
You're getting ahead.
Continue.
All right. So what I want to first identify is that we all know that when you look at guys who are actually downrange using these firearms, war fighters, so on and so forth, everybody you see has got a completely kitted out to the nines setup. You have your lights, your lasers, your grips, your optics, your suppressors, and well, this is what all the operators use, undoubtedly, Henry. Not to mention in the marketing material that you see in the firearms industry, it's on everything is done up to the nines with every potential possible accessory known to man on the rifle. But this wasn't always the case, right? Where does the pivot from sort of that M16 base era rifle, the M16A2 transition into, I don't know, this bad boy that we see right here?
I mean, Josh is being semi-facetious in saying that all operators use this, but anyways.
No, I'm not.
Continue. So yeah, it comes from the SOPMOD. I mean, I think for us, you and I have identified that the SOPMOD Block 1 program was definitively that one turning point or like milestone that really marks that turn in the mentality when it comes to these things. But the mentality itself actually comes prior to the Block 1 project, because we've recently recorded a discussion on the XM4, which has lineage from the Delta operators for the Black Hawk Down era of the Car 15. And so what you would see were the Delta operators back then were, and to a certain extent, the SAS as well with the MP5s, they were enhancing capability by putting accessories onto their firearms. So think back at the Delta guys back in Black Hawk Down. Contrast them with the Rangers that they were with. The Rangers were all with slick M16A2s, slick Car 15s, and slick M60s slash Minimes, M249s. Whereas the Delta guys had red dots and lights, and in certain aspects, they were even putting night vision capable Anvis laser aiming devices onto their carbines. So they were transitioning their rifle into something that could fight in more than just the daylight capacity and more than just shooting at a 300-meter target capacity. They were trying to give their rifle, in essence, more capability. And I think that's something that Josh and I, in our discussion, we've kind of looked back on this, because it comes to there's a certain transition in mindset because of the lack of accessories, the lack of integration systems onto the firearms that came prior to this like 90s and 2000s era accessory renaissance through the M1913 rail systems. That if you were issued an M16, you were issued that 8.5-pound piece of plastic and metal, and that's it. You that's what you expected. You expected to fight day and night with that thing. If you were issued a FAMAS, you were not looking at the FALI system, and if you were issued the AUG, you were not expecting to be running the A3SF as you would see down there. And a lot of that concept came down to the idea of operators, and clearly these were operators back then, trying to add more capability to run different missions on set. So trying to use their rifles at night, trying to use it up close, trying to add a grenade launcher to the bottom with still using a pick rail on the top to use different sighting devices for different mission sets. And so that's where it comes from. So there's a huge divide. There's a huge, it's almost like if you were raised, let's say, like if you were raised riding the bus every single day, and then you were told that you could drive your own car and go to places, and you don't think about, oh, this is the road that I could take that way. People were trained to think of weight as this item that you were issued with. And so you drilled with it, you slept with it, you ran with it, and that's it. Like what the weight is what the weight is at the end of the day, instead of I can add more capability to it. And of course, in pop culture, there's a lot of abuse of the capabilities that were put onto it, and misunderstandings of what the capabilities are used for. And that do you need to put all this stuff on there, or just because you can doesn't mean you should put all this stuff there. And so in short, that's really what we're trying to delve into. Weight versus capability, and capability as a concept did not exist in prior to the mid-90s.
Right, in terms of accessories, which is where we're going to suggest here throughout the course of this conversation, the vast majority and differential takes place when you're looking at weight. So with that said, let's ask everybody to tune in real quick here for quiz number 1, question number 1. This is an interactive session, Henry. And what this comes down to is a quick poll. Agree or disagree? Drop it in the chat right now that a carbine, general purpose rifle, carbine, over 10 pounds is wrong or a mistake or a gross misuse of what the rifle is intended to be. Let's see what the chat has to say here.
So first of all, 10 pounds for people who did not grow up with the imperial system, i.e. I technically did
You.
not. I came back
You.
into the imperial system. What is 10 pounds? What weighs 10 pounds?
10-pound dumbbell.
Ah, thank you, Josh. I really appreciate your helpfulness. Let's I can go on to Google and see what weighs 10 pounds. This is completely done live, so I have no idea what's going to come up. What weighs 10 pounds? 12 common things that weigh 10 pounds. Are you ready for this?
Go, hit me with them.
An average dog could weigh up to, dude, that's okay.
Dude, that's a small
that's a
dog.
really small. My two small dogs weigh more than that. A common vacuum cleaner, a small microwave, a sack of potatoes. Now, if you're in Russia, that sack of potatoes will most certainly weigh more than 10 pounds. A medium-sized bowling ball, 2 reams of letter-sized paper. That's close to A4 size. The metric system. Let's see. What else weighs 10 pounds? An average folding chair that has padding on it. 2 red bricks weighs about 10 pounds. That's a good one to look at. A gallon of paint. Except I don't think you could buy it by the gallon in metric countries. So that doesn't help.
All right. You've done great, Henry. This was fantastic. You've really helped everybody understand and rationalize how much 10-pound actually weighs.
Well, look, this is everybody knows this. A human head weighs 10 pounds. Obviously, we've all experienced that. Thank you, Angus.
All right. In the chat, I see a lot of both here. A lot of disagrees, a lot of agrees. So some people saying like, no, you can absolutely have a rifle over 10 pounds. Some saying you can definitely have get the kilograms off the screen, Henry. Get it off.
4.5 kilos. So that's what 10 pounds is. 4.5 kilos.
That's right. All right.
I will keep it on until you.
I'm going right now. We asked this same question in a little bit of a different way, but we asked this same question, mind you, 5 months ago. We've been thinking about this subject for the last 5 to 6 months. And when you total up these percentages here, over 70% of those polled believed that a rifle over 9.5 pounds or 4.3 kg was too heavy with all of the kittings and accessories on it. And that is pretty crazy to consider when you actually look at starting to rationalize how much this stuff, these accessories, these attachments, basic configurations end up weighing. Like, that's pretty nuts because the majority of setups are absolutely coming in at the very minimum, coming in over 8.5 pounds.
All right. Any old timers out there who prefer the M14, by the way? Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's already breaching 10 pounds, evidently. A fully loaded M14, which, yeah, it is. With 0 of those capabilities. Maybe you've got a sling. But, yeah. Anyways. I'd like to add, though, 10 pounds. Like, I did not know this was a thing until Josh brought it up to me and saying that, hey, people are saying 10 pounds as a threshold. Like, when I look at
going to double digits, it's like going from single digits to double digits.
It's because it's mentally when we're in this system where we go to, adding a new digit, like going from 9 to 10, that mentally is a threshold to us. But in reality, that has no bearing on, that is not an actual threshold. It's not a scientific thing that at the 10-pound mark, you will cause X amount of injuries in sports medicine. That's not a scientific thing. It's just mentally we think about that as a threshold because you increase a digit. It's the same thing with like long distance shooting. So one thing I was told like early on by mentors, people will use the 1,000 yard or 1,000 meter as a as a standard for a rifle, right? And it is because it's used in a lot of competitions. It's the 1,000 yards shot, like for F class, is a standard. But in reality, like if you were actually to take the rifle into the field, that 1,000 yard makes has zero correlation on the threshold of how well or how poorly your rifle does. Like, does your rifle break the sound barrier at the 1,000 yard mark? If it does, then that is a scientific threshold that you should pay attention to. But if it doesn't, then that doesn't make a lot of scientific sense to use that as an actual threshold outside of the fact that in our human minds that those 3 zeros turning from 900 into a 1 and 3 zeros in the back is a neat and pretty number for us to think about. I'm not saying that you should change your ranges from 1,000 meters or 1,000 ranges and change it to something else, but just understand that that is an artificial construct of thinking 10 pounds or 1,000 yards or 100 yards, 100 meters is an actual scientific thing that we should, hold on to. But, anyways, if anything, like this could delve into a different discussion on what type of zero should you use for max point blank range. But I digress. That's a different topic for a different day. 10 pounds is an arbitrary number that looks really neat and pretty in our minds, is my
Right.
point.
So when we transition that conversation, right, this concept of how much things should weigh, again, super majority said anything over 9.5 pounds is too much for a general purpose rifle or carbine, right? Like it is considered too much. And even crazier is that 30% of people said anything over 8.5 pounds falls into that bracket of too much. And again, we'll get into that in just a second on context of what that actually means and circle back to this. But first, one of the things that is required when it comes down to this conversation, and the chat is already lit up with this comment already, is, well, what am I trying to do with the gun? Well, what am I trying to do with it? Well, look, guys, like ultimately, this is a question you have to answer for yourself, right? There is a relatable answer to this, and we're going to get into that in just a second. But everything we're going to talk about from this point forward is all about trade-offs. Everything is this is one of the most simple baseline element trade-offs of, as you increase capability in general, you're also going to increase weight. And so you're trying to find the balance point between these two things and identify an area where you have sufficient capability for what you want with a weight that is acceptable for how you intend to carry the gun, but also use the gun, right? Because in many of these cases, the conversation on weight is, well, I don't want to carry something very heavy, but there's also a second half of that, which is, well, I also don't want to try to be swinging around a 15-pound AR trying to engage and clear a room, for example. So when we look at that, we have some questions which are, again, everybody has to relate this to themselves. And Henry and I have gone through and we've thought out answers to this question. But I would be interested to see, just generally speaking, you guys drop in the chat, what do you think are some of the base capabilities that you need and that you can boil down your requirements on for a general purpose rifle, just sort of your go-to standard rifle? What are those capabilities?
Instagram drip, obviously. Open and shut case. Like, if you have the drip, it doesn't matter the weight.
That's your number one, always and forever?
Not just the number one, that is the only thing. That's why you see me with all these iron-sighted World War II rifles. It's for the drip.
Love it. Somebody is already, I'm reading through the chats, somebody has already hit our exact set of requirements. So it goes to show, I think we were at least on par with where our mind was at in terms of the requirement list.
You mean the guy who suggested 14.5-inch foul?
Maybe for you. Is it Rhodesian camo painted?
I don't know. We may or may not be testing out Rhodesian Halbeck devices later on down the road, but we'll see.
Okay. Keep these pouring in, guys, but let us transition and talk about what we see this in terms of a general consensus for our GPR setups. The first one, Henry, this is one that you have impressed the importance upon me in the last few years, is that the rifle has to be carryable and slingable. I, for forever, hated putting slings on my guns. I still do, but that's in large part because of how I primarily use them. And that's in a vehicle, on the range, or in the house. And is it reasonable that you still need a sling in those instances? I think the answer is yes. I think you have convinced me that the answer is yes. But it's certainly less relevant than somebody who is literally having to go like climb a mountain with the rifle and needs to sling it over their shoulder. Like those two things have differing rationale as to why a sling is relevant. But I do believe we both universally now agree that a sling is exceptionally important.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I have had the lovely time under the organization of which we know as the U.S. Army to enjoy the presence of my vintage rifle for extended periods of times, and it's not like you get traumatized by the experience, but you have many episodes of freak out that you left your rifle at some point of your your time when you're in. Like, doesn't matter whether it's like basic deployment, whatever, but the sling itself, keeping the rifle on you, like obviously there's pros and cons to it, right? If you're in a mobile environment, if you're working in vehicles, so you're like trying to dismount and you've got a poorly kitted out sling is worse than no sling, because that could get snagged on stuff, that could hinder you, that could stop you from dismounting so you can bail out of a vehicle when it gets rolled over, right? A poorly kitted out sling is worse than no sling, but no sling is a huge handicap on a rifle where there are modern techniques of cinching the sling or using rubber bands to pull the sling tighter to the rifle that takes away a lot of the downsides of using a sling, which is getting caught on stuff. It comes
Right.
to
Right.
if you train, if you I use word train, this is like such a buzzword now. If you use a sling very often, that turns into just another feature of the rifle.
Right.
But if you don't have it, then you don't have that feature of the rifle, which is you would potentially lose it.
So after sling, the key pieces that we then got into immediately were, we'd think that the rifle needs to be able to hit targets out to a certain distance. And as you can see, we've highlighted the 300 here because 300 is maybe it's required, maybe it's not required. It depends. And we'll get into the depending here in just a second. But that has two pieces, which is the rifle has to be capable of doing it, which most rifles are going to be able to go from 0 to 300. But if that number is different for you, if you are out on a big wide open prairie style ranch and potentially need to shoot at a coyote at 700, like maybe that's something that you need to consider there, right? The rifle's base capability, but then also, and really where we're going with this, is the sighting system capability and how much weight you have to add on to the gun with the sighting system to be able to basically allow you to see the target well enough to hit it at that distance, as well as to PID the target, or positively identify the target. And this one is one that a lot of people really, I think, gloss over within the context of a general purpose rifle, at least within the United States, where you can be 30 yards from somebody and still need magnification to be able to positively ID. And that's something that we have seen in practice when you watch any number of law enforcement engagements with subjects, even in close close quarters, inside of homes or buildings, there's still relevancy to this, and that's something that is not, again, something unique that we're saying, but you can see it in practice, and there's been plenty of people who will talk about this and have talked about it for years.
No, you have to delineate something though. The hit slash accuracy capable of making a 300-meter hit versus the requirement for positive identification. So magnified optics, essentially. You don't need magnification to hit 300 meters.
Exactly.
That's something that we've I mean, hopefully, if you're here, hopefully you've seen some practical accuracy episodes. 300 meters is not difficult to hit, especially well contrasted on a bright day in an open field in a prone position. You can do that with even iron sights, no issue. The real question here comes down to the positive identification. Like, and again, I would almost put this slide as 3 major things, 3 plus 1, like 3.5 major things, right? Because you're PID capable in like maybe like 70%, 80% of the cases. It may not break your general purpose usability, but it's most certainly would fill out that remainder 25, 30%, right? And so that is a really nice thing to add. Like if you're able to add it, and honestly, I'm getting ahead of myself here because I know you're going to talk about it. It doesn't detract a lot. It's not a huge penalty to add that capability in many cases. But, you know, I will talk about the adding or subtracting the magnifier slash prism later on when we get into the Swiss SIGs.
Right. And then lastly here was some sort of low light, no light capability. And this is an interesting one because when you think about it within context, the immediate response is to go to white light, but this could also mean night vision. And then there's also a huge, and this is one that I have a tough time understanding, but there's a huge contingent of individuals who will say that having a light on the rifle is bad for any number of reasons. Like you're going to give away your position. It's unneeded weight. You don't need it for blah, 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 blah. The number of times that I've seen that where you can be in the middle of the day, you can be looking into a structure that is unlit and just need to be able to throw some light into a room that's dark.
The last time I actually used an M4 in a combat scenario was I was telling you about that one time we had a base infiltration, and I had swapped out with a National Guard NCO, swapped out for his M4 and M68 CCO with no white light on it, and it was in it was like 2100, so it was like 9 p.m. pitch black outside. Of course, like on the base, you're looking at spotty lighting. It wasn't a blackout base, so you're looking at spotty lighting. And yeah, I mean, it's very apparent when you're going around and looking into bunkers that you very much would like some type of low light capability. Now, that being said, in a military environment, I mean, that's something that we'll talk about, a little bit further. That may not have as much of a not that it doesn't have relevance, it doesn't have as much of a pull versus somebody who is a lone ranger by himself and this is his lifeline. Like
Right.
his rifle is his lifeline.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're basically there. So really quickly then, what do these capabilities translate to? I think we've covered this, but it's a sling, some sort of capability for the sighting system to be magnified, mainly to your point, to allow for PID capability, right? Like that's the main reason. It's not to be able to hit the target from 0 to 2 or 0 to 300. It's mainly to be able to ensure what you're shooting at. And then lastly, some sort of weapon mounted light system. So then, Henry, this is exactly where you were talking about how your job or what you're doing with the firearm could influence the requirement list and change around the importance levels.
Yeah. So, I mean, before we even get into terrain, and Man, since we did a pick one, the phrase METC has certainly gotten flashed around the community significantly. But before you even consider that, like considering friendlies, like look at who you are and the environment you're in. The military requirement versus a law enforcement requirement is fairly different. I honestly, magnifiers are really nice, and especially if you're a law enforcement officer and you're not really like carrying that stuff on patrol, on foot patrol all the time. Like you're not foot patrolling with your M4. That magnifier may be pretty nice to keep in the patrol car because you're not really bearing that weight everywhere you go, or an LPVO, so you can push LPVO if you want. Huh. Um, it also depends drastically on urban versus rural, right? So from the mill perspective, a lot of us who were in OEF, so Afghanistan, had a much different perspective on war than a lot of the vets who went to Iraq for OIF. Because if you were working in Iraq, a lot of those instances, it's not urban like America suburbia, but it's Middle East urban. Like that is a completely different environment than Afghanistan being in the mountains, to where potentially you can get away without using white light in Afghanistan because you have more of a standoff distance in much more of the scenario, right? So then when you push into urban, that also doesn't mean in urban, just because you're in urban doesn't mean that you don't need a magnified optic. Because we were just talking about this earlier, just because you're in a downtown environment doesn't mean that you won't have to hop out onto a street and make a straight line 200-meter shot or 100-meter shot down the road as a law enforcement officer. Like if you think of it, that scene in Heat, the bank robbery scene, you remember how he pulled out the Vince, detective, shoot, what's his name? Vince, the detective. At the very end, he was facing down Tom Sizemore, who was holding a hostage with a Galil, and probably like he was making like a 20, 30-meter shot with iron sights. That shot would have been significantly easier if he had a magnified red dot or an LPVO to really draw that one, and knowing his close range holdoffs for that 25, 30-meter shot. That shot would be significantly easier to do. But then if you push it even farther in that one particular scene, this is the Heat scene with the bank robbery. Those are Leo's law enforcement officers in an urban environment facing 100-meter or so shootout with bank robbers, right? And this is something that the officers in the North Hollywood shootout in real life actually faced. And if you were to have a magnified rifle and you were facing a suspect who was armored from head to toe, like they were in North Hollywood, being able to target some of the squishier spots would have put that fight down a lot sooner.
Yeah.
Let's say like the pelvic girdle, right? But
Well, I mean, without a
as a
doubt, yes.
as a like an American citizen, and this is something that, unfortunately, it applies to people who have the freedoms and the rights to maintain their own firearms. As like an armed citizen, that is even more of a wild card on what you are looking at. It could be everything and it could be nothing at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So all of this, we're not even talking about the actual terrain of where you guys out there are located. So
Yeah. And I think it harkens back to this point of those requirements that we list as our like general baseline. That's like an attempt at generalizing what we think is mostly applicable. And you can deviate over it or under it a little bit, but it's mostly going to be applicable. But Henry, this is where, as you say, and this is something that I know you wanted to talk about here, when you think about most countries, at least most modern countries that we're talking about in the West, But of course, it applies basically everywhere today. You have, and especially in the United States, which is obviously a very large country, but you have huge variations of terrain and environments. Whereas what we're doing in Texas, in Southeast Texas, is one specific requirement list, which does influence how we perceive the requirements on our GPR setup. But you can be somewhere completely separate and have a wildly different series of requirements. So, guys, in the chat, hit which numbers on these images most closely apply to where you are located. And it can be
And
more than one. It can be more than one of them.
And on top of that, add sort of what you think is an ideal setup for you to use in those environments. But one thing I want to touch up on that you were talking about, though, these are all things that you would see in America as a single country, and the expanse of America sort of escapes people in smaller countries like in Europe. I remember when I was working in Germany, some of my neighbors were they were not they weren't like they were sort of like, wow, you have to drive across Germany a couple times just to do your military things. And I was like, yeah, it's a 4-hour drive. Like it's no big deal. Because of course, yeah, I'm coming here from Texas. Like 4 hours gets you from Houston, gets you to
Dallas.
Yeah, gets you to Dallas. So it gets you to or Austin.
Yeah.
It doesn't even get you to the border. It certainly doesn't get you to West Texas, which West Texas is closer to number 7. And in all of these locations in Texas, you certainly have number 4s. In many of the places west of here, you'll see number 9. But locally, it's actually piney forests here in the southeast area.
Mm-hmm.
So we're actually in the woods. We're not in the open plains. But that doesn't mean that we don't have open plains. That also doesn't mean that we don't have downtown Houston that resembles number 6. So all of this really starts getting convoluted whenever you're kind of throwing all this stuff together on what is general purpose to begin with.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the key point here, right? All of this, if we go back a couple slides ago, the key point that we emphasize is that this has to be applicable to you. So the concepts that we're discussing here, you have to take them and apply them to what makes sense in your environment and what makes, in the area in which you are most likely to operate.
And, well, I would put it this way, though. For military and law enforcement, you have a lot of this defined on where your jurisdiction is, or where in military terms your AO is, your area of operations are. So what people, I think we've really learned this in the last 2 decades of global war on terror, that how you train may not be how things are deployed when you're in the field. And so switching AO, you may switch up your setup quite a bit, because back in the early days, if you were in a regular unit, you'll have command sergeant majors running around and trying to dress everybody, meaning your entire Molly kit is looking the exact same, like he was trying to outfit soldiers with the Alice kit.
Right.
But same thing with rifles. That sergeant major back in the day may make everybody put the same optic at the same location. They designate every single thing towards that. But I think depending on unit, but I think in the last 20 years, we've gotten better at trying to match the terrain to the loadout if the command is any decent at their job.
So let's transition into the nerdier part of this conversation, a bit less philosophical and a bit more down in the numbers. Okay. And this is where take those concepts that we've just discussed on your area of operation, the requirements you believe you need within that area, and let's start applying them from an actual building of the weight profile on the rifle based on, again, the addition of capabilities requiring the addition of weight. So we started this off I went out and looked at maybe like 5 to 10 different popular rifles that had these barrel lengths. And we use the AR because it is undoubtedly the most commercially popular, like fighting carbine in the US. And the results that I came up with here were really interesting. So an 18-inch AR, naked, nothing on it, no mag, no ammo, nothing, was averaging somewhere around 7 pounds. A 16-inch AR around 6 pounds, 5 ounces, so just under 6.5 pounds. A 14.5-inch AR was 6 pounds, 3 ounces, so just barely less than the 16-inch gun. And then a 10.5-inch gun was 5 pounds, 5 ounces, again, naked. So these are some of the baseline positions that you're starting off with. So when people are saying things like 7.5 pounds is like the max weight on the rifle, it's like, well, to achieve that, you have to be starting with an ultra light baseline build. Again, these are averages. These are averages of commercially available setups.
You obviously did not put the what would Stoner do rifle on this average, because it would have skewed the 16-inch AR to like the lowest one of all of them.
So it's like what? I think I looked it up. I believe it's 5 pounds. What is it? Let's see. It was 5 pounds. It's just under 6 pounds, I thought. 5 pounds and change. What would Stoner do rifle? Let's see. Oh wow, no, way less than that. Okay, 4.5 pounds. So that's actually considerably cheaper, or lighter rather. Okay, so that I definitely didn't remember it being that light. But yes, like if you're doing something like that, that is a radical difference than these things. But that's probably the only way that you're achieving a final completed firearm that has the capabilities that we were sort of identifying and is under like 8 pounds.
And well, we've got slides. We've got a slide that will cover sort of how you're able to gain a lot of stuff by doing that too. I mean, it's just a numbers game, unfortunately.
Right. So the next thing that just really quick, I see some comments coming in about like, well, how are these averages achieved? Like I just went out and looked up like popular setups, like standard BCM, basic, regular carbine. And yes, there are differences in the weights of those based on barrel profile, handguard material, magnesium versus aluminum, the length of the handguards. Like, yes. But these are averages, gang. Like you can go look up what if you're looking for a lightweight one, you can go look up specifics on this. But this is what the majority were coming in at. So then we start talking about how much the addition of certain items add in terms of capabilities. And again, these were just averages, right? Like I looked up some of the popular models, and these are some of the things that we were seeing. A sling, somewhere between like 7 to 10 ounces. So over 0.5 pound on average, over 0.5 pound. So if you're starting in this position, your 16-inch basic AR with a sling gets plus 0.5 pound, and you're sneaking up to a 7-pound gun.
Hold on. One comment that actually I think we should pay attention to is how the NFA has artificially skewed how rifles are laid out as well. So just wanted to stick it out there about, we'll have more of the discussion later on, but why 16-inch and 14.5 pin and welds and 13.9 pin and welds have become very popular is potentially also an artificial thing. However, not completely, because like part of that comes down to Delta's work with the 737 series and 727s into the XM4 series, but we've got more videos on that later on. But just take note that the NFA also has a certain bearing on rifle selection for many people out there, and local laws.
Right. And then let's just power through a couple more of these here. A micro red dot sight, somewhere between 5 and 8 ounces. A large full holographic sight like the EOTechs, like somewhere around 11 ounces. Magnifier, 11 ounces. LPVOs, somewhere between like 20 and 30 ounces. Now, granted, like this is inclusive of you got to put a mount on it as well, right? Like you can't just have the tube floating above the gun.
Dude, by the way, the ounces, I've been in America for a
Okay,
long
16
time.
ounces, 16 ounces in a pound, 16
Okay.
ounces in a pound. And how many ounces in a gram?
Kilo. How many ounces
Now it's
equals?
easier to do it to grams, I think.
Okay.
It's
Grams works
30,
too.
about it's, I'm rounding pretty roughly here, but it's about 30 grams per ounce.
Okay, got it.
Right, about 30 grams per ounce.
Those who deal in the underworld will be able to talk kilos and grams. I continue.
So WMLs, somewhere between like 4 and 8 ounces.
Weapon mounted light for those
Yeah.
that are wondering.
Yep. Oh, Henry, the slate
Oh,
stop. The slate stop is less than half an ounce.
it's practically a no-brainer, gentlemen.
SVG only 1 ounce. A full set of slate grips is only 1.5 ounces. So you can get a full bundle accessory package for your grip for
Hold
less
on.
than 2.5 ounces.
So, someone's saying that I'm pretending I don't know. I have actually made errors on videos because my scale reads like however many pounds and ounces, and I read that as in however many pounds point ounces because I'm used to reading the kilograms, like the 13 point whatever kilos, right?
Right.
That is
6.5 pounds is actually 6 pounds, 8 ounces, right?
there's a lot of things I could adjust to. In the US, the pounds and ounces system is a pain in the ass for me. The whole thing with using ounces for liquid is also ridiculous. I don't understand how that works. And then
Hey,
in
the
the
same thing
UK,
happens with milliliters and grams.
no, milliliters, that goes by the 10.
No,
And
milliliters and grams for liquid versus weight.
I'll get you a liter of cola later on, but like in the UK, using stone also is something that confuses me because in Hong Kong we also don't use stone. So that is actually genuinely something that confuses me. Also, why I use like if you look at the practical accuracy side, I know like it drives Josh nuts that I do like 8 point something pounds. Josh always goes like, "What the hell is 8.3 pounds?" And he has to go convert it back to ounces because it makes no sense to him. But that's like how that my brain has trouble figuring out ounces because of that. Anyways, I digress. I know like it's not just me here, but continue. Like we've got Canadians here watching as well.
All right, so back to the subject at hand, Henry. Rant ended. Bipods. One thing that we definitively did not include in like a general purpose setup was bipods. And it's a good thing because bipods are stinking heavy, very heavy, anywhere between 3/4 of a pound to over a pound.
Thank you for using like conversion to a pound because that actually makes more sense to me. Continue.
Okay. Then when you get into suppressors, short K cans, somewhere around, again, like 3/4 of a pound, and full size suppressors over a pound plus. So when you start to look at these things, think about very quickly back to that original question that was a fully kitted rifle, fully kitted. 70+% of people said over 9.5 pounds was too heavy for a fully kitted generalist rifle. Let's do a little bit of math here. All right. An 18-inch SPR, mind you, SPR with a mid-range optic, somewhere like a 2-20 Night Force or a 4-16 Primary Arms GLX or any number of these, a billion different optic options. That's got a little bit more than an LPVO power, so a little bit more weight usually comes with that. With a bipod, and let's just call it like an offset micro dot, right? Or an inline micro dot at the 12 o'clock position. Anywhere between 10.5 and 11.5 pounds. Okay. Well over 10. Uh, yes.
Continue.
Okay. A 16-inch AR with just an LPVO and weapon mounted light on it, somewhere between 9 pounds and 10 pounds, right? Maybe on the closer to the 9-pound end of the spectrum there, but still right at that absolute limit of where people were saying, oh yeah, it's way too heavy.
And these are non-suppressed.
These are non-suppressed, unless it's specifically, we'll get to the suppressed option here in a second, but also unloaded, right? These are also unloaded. So a 14.5-inch gun with a red dot sight with a magnifier and the weapon light, just as opposed to the LPVO, yeah, you're like shaving off maybe between the barrel length and the sighting options. You know, if you're on the heavier end of the LPVO spectrum, and then you're down to like an aim point micro mount on a ScalarWorks, or aim point micro on a ScalarWorks mount, which is very light, you're still at 8.5 to 9, maybe even a little over 9 pounds in these instances. And then even down to the 10.5-inch gun, which to your point, Henry, is an SBR, right? Well, thank you, ATF. Yes. Who knows what the hell is going on now with the ATF and what is and isn't allowed with pistol braces and everything else. But when you look at this, 10.5-inch gun with a red dot, just a basic red dot, a weapon light, and a suppressor, because running a 10.5-inch gun without a can is basically crazy unless you're specifically doing it for being, I don't know, in like a micro backpack type scenario. You're still at 8 pounds. So still over that bottom threshold where some people were saying like, no, 7.5 is the max they would ever go to. That is pretty wild. So again, none of these specifically represent like a base general purpose necessarily. I mean, I suppose the 16 and the 14.5 are the two closest to what we were talking about when we were describing our GPR sort of conceptual idea. But maybe a 10.5-inch gun that's a 0 to 150 with a red dot and a suppressor is more likely what somebody might use, depending upon, again, all of those stipulations about their use case, their location, their environment, so on and so forth.
Well, again, like it comes back to we both had a sneaking suspicion that people were throwing weights out there, but they did not actually know what that weight signifies. Because 10 pounds sounds neat and pretty in your mind, they don't think about what 10 pounds actually is. What is 8 pounds? What's 10 pounds? What are they actually basing this threshold on? I don't think people think about that. And that's how we arrived to this scenario where people were using this artificial construct as a standard, but that standard has no sense, no reason to exist.
Yeah. So then there's another piece to this, which is none of this is night vision related. None of it.
Yep.
And the second that you add night vision capability, and we're definitely not even talking about rifle mounted night vision, which is talk about weight. Holy crap. Just the ability to use a rifle under night vision to aim it and to have a suppressor, because if you're shooting under night vision a bunch and you don't have a can, also, holy cow, you're talking about adding huge amounts of weight to the gun, like huge amounts of weight. Because the suppressors, as we know from that previous slide, are all about a pound minimum. And then some sort of laser aiming module, or LAM, right? LAM, is in the half pound to slightly over half a pound bucket. Now, so the laser aiming module itself actually isn't like that heavy for the capability that it brings you. But I mean, when you start tacking all of these things on, suddenly the addition of those tools, your rifle weighs easily into the 10 plus, 11 plus pound category for general purpose setups. And so, Henry, one of the things you specifically identified is like, well, what does this actually mean? How much do these things weigh, right? If we go from a red dot to magnification, that's at minimum somewhere between 10 and 20 ounces in additional weight that you would be adding on to the setup. And when we look at what that means within context, like if the base setup is 130 ounces, right? Adding another 10 on top of that is a not insignificant addition in terms of percent increase, right? Like you're talking like an 8% increase in your weight to go from red dot to magnified, for example.
So I think because we deal with a lot of classics, specifically, you know, I'm a huge enjoyer of the classic rifles. An iron sighted AR is just chef's kiss, right? Compared to a lot of the things in order to the vibes that it exudes. And there is a drip tax that is added on to some of the rifles that we will examine later on. I think there has, again, you know, we have to emphasize there's a difference between can it be used in this role versus can it be optimized in this role. Can I use something? Can I take something to war versus should I take something to war? Are two very different things. So yeah, I actually deployed with an Ironside M16A2. Yes, and in fact, many other people have deployed with an Ironside M16A2. Given in that position, if you were to drop an M4 with an ACOG and piggyback red dot sight onto it, would I choose the M4 in a scenario where my life potentially depends on it and my soldiers' lives depends on it? Yes, absolutely. So there is a huge difference between could you and should you, and we need to keep that delineation between, you know, as we go into this, because there's a lot of drip, but drip does not always keep you alive. Many times it keeps you afloat on Instagram, though.
Well, and to that point, Henry, when we're talking about this balance of capabilities and weight, there is a point where you cannot just keep slapping capabilities on the gun going, well, I'll take the extra weight because I want all these capabilities, because you lose focus on what the rifle is actually configured for, right? And that's where we'll go here in just a second, which is having a configuration designed for a certain thing and then understanding the weight that you can really get away with, or you should be expecting to have to pay that penalty for on that particular setup.
On the topic of balance, we're about to get into it, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
This is one thing that I had a huge emphasis on when Josh and I first met. You know, like there's a difference between something heavy and something that is poorly, you know, heavy but balanced versus something heavy and poorly balanced. And we've got examples we're going to talk about later on in the slide deck.
Yeah, but I've already seen comments who are have raised the point of balance and the importance of it.
Huge. Like the AUG, the A3SF that you showed in that image earlier, way heavier than some ARs out there. But when you shoot it, when you run around with it, you don't feel it. Versus we've got two builds that we're going to show that are actually lighter than the A3SF, that when you and I ran around with it, it did not feel lighter than the AUG A3SF. And to that point, so I got to call out Lucas over at T-Rex Arms. I was watching one of his videos earlier. I don't know which video it was, but he was kind of like the SAS rifle in Nairobi. How they and for that matter, Jeff Gerwich's rifle, dropping the lamb closer to the optic rather than all the way out front to prioritize the shooting comfort versus the night vision comfort. I'd never done that because, I mean, I just never done that because I haven't actually
even that, Henry, that is it's a microcosm of the totality of the conversation on weight versus capability. Balance, to replace the term weight in that scenario, but you're giving up capability of having the lamb in an optimized position for it to function, not splash the rifle with IR, not have the laser interrupted if your hand is in the wrong position, right? Maximum capability is having the lamb out further, generally speaking, on a a fighting carbine style rifle. But bringing it back, you're sacrificing some of that performance capability, but you're balancing the rifle better.
Right. And so for a lot of people, I mean, it's shooting at the flat range. But if you were to have carried that rifle for 10, 12 miles and then received contact and dumped half of your basic load ammunition, ran back, resupplied, got back into the fight, you're dealing with jelly arms at that point, right? So it's a huge advantage when you have a rifle at that point that is balanced to where you could still fire unsupported. You don't have to, like draw your arms back all the way to the mag well and rest it on your ammo system just to try to get stable to squeeze rounds off with jelly arms. That's an aspect that a lot of people don't experience. That is a very, very real thing, especially in prolonged exposures, like prolonged times when you're out there. So balance is a very important thing when you're talking about an extended time use of a firearm.
Well, and then obviously, yes, right? And the general conversation on weight in that type of environment, not just the balance, but the weight as a total, right? And how the offset of fatigue and how capabilities versus fatigue have to be balanced. What about in the inverse of that, Henry? What about the situations where, well, is weight ever a positive thing?
Yeah, if you're a defensive marksman, if you've got a heavy Mark 12 posted up on a roof, yes. If you can weigh your Mark 12 down, or if you can use a heavier rifle in a static position, it is absolutely a positive because you're going to get your follow-up shots a lot easier. You're going to be able to observe your splash a lot easier with a rifle. It all really depends on the scenario you're at. So, like in this instance, let's look at like if you were a SWAT officer and you were looking at selecting precision rifles and you're working in the urban area. So you're looking at maybe like an 18, 20-inch barreled rifle with a suppressor. Weight is not going to detract from your use case. But if let's say you're working in a heavily urban environment with high towers, and you've got to potentially take like extreme line of sight shots, or basically step out of the CQB environment, and you're not going on foot patrol with a rifle, basically if the AR comes out, then something is going down, right? That weight may not be as big of a detractor because it's not hitting you as hard as the soldier who is on a cop in a faraway place.
I would boil this down to a really simplistic answer, and it's probably overly simplistic, but when shooting when doing the actual shooting, weight to a certain extent is actually really, really nice because it allows you to be, the gun does not move as much when it's recoiling. And the gun also does not, generally speaking, move as much as you're trying to aim it, right? Your little body mechanics that are causing the tremors in the gun and the movement in the gun. To reference Joe at Bruiser's commentary, the gun on the tripod isn't moving, right? Like when we were out with him on range, like the gun on the tripod by itself doesn't move. We make the gun move, right? Our insertion into that scenario causes the gun to move. The heavier the gun, the less it moves based upon your forces applied to it. So there are a lot of really positive elements to weight when it comes down to the actual shooting. Transitions are a little bit different, but the actual shooting. Fair?
Yep.
All right. So should we look at some setups? Let's look at some setups.
Yeah.
And we'll start with your setup, Henry. The block one.
It is not slick. My setup. It is America's setup. Thank you very much. And shout out to my millions of brothers and sisters in arms out there. This is what we all use.
Yes. How much, Henry, does this weigh? Do you remember?
No. I remember it was a lot nicer to get in and out of vehicles, yes, but not that bad. I mean, it's just slick with an optic on it, and quite frankly, if you're talking about in this consideration and you don't have night vision, you don't have a light, I would actually just rip the block one rail off of it and just slap on slick
Didn't you do
polymers.
that when you were deployed? Weren't
With
you
my
issued a
M16, I did, yeah.
with your iron sight M16? You were issued a full Riz rail,
Dude,
right?
the transition era was weird, man. Like they did weird things. They put a Riz rail on my M16A2 and handed it to me. I was like,
There's nothing on the Riz rail. There's no
"You're gonna
reason for
you're
it.
gonna give me like a PEC unit? No, sir, we don't have those." Like, awesome. So like basically run like no night vision, no light, no PEC, nothing, and you're giving me a Riz rail. But yeah, like it's actually worse because then it was a Riz rail without the covers on the side, and I had to source those myself. If you catch my drift.
Nice.
Good
So,
NCOs will make it happen.
so with this in mind, some very, very close to correct answers here. This is just under 8 pounds unloaded. Mind you, we did all of our assessments were unloaded, but just under 8 pounds. So again, is it possible to have a functional general purpose sort of setup that's under 8 pounds? Sure. Even without it being an ultra light, super, what would Stoner do base rifle, right? It's possible, but you do definitely have some trade-offs. The Prism optic is a very solid option to get you towards that goal because you're definitely on the lighter end, but you have magnification.
Mm-hmm. And notice one thing too. I'm running the LaRue Tactical QD mount on this, which is, you joke around about QD, like, what are you going to QD it onto another rifle? It's not about QDing it onto another rifle per se, but if you have backup iron sights and you don't have QD, your iron sights are useless. Using the QD gives you the option of using iron sights for backup if you need to use the iron sights for backup. So that's just a small thing to point out there. Like QD doesn't necessarily you're just trying to QD things on and off of rifles or whatever. You're trying to optimize all of the capabilities that are on the rifle and give yourself a field strippable option. Like that.
Now this was an interesting one, Henry. So we posted this one to see how many people got it right. And very few people got the weight right on this. Most people were way, way under. I want chat right now. Throw in what you think this setup weighs. This is a 16-inch BCM, and it's what we're calling it like the urban general purpose rifle, right? It's basically a 16-inch gun. It's got a white light on it and an aim point micro on a Scalar Works mount, and we'll go unloaded weights for purpose here.
I didn't realize you were running that single chamber brake on it.
On that one, yeah.
Have you ever fired it inside of a structure?
Yeah, big boom.
I mean, so on that note, the Scalar mount, Scalar Works mounts, very nice. Like that's honestly one of my favorite mounts to use the T2s with. Not only is it light, but on some setups you can actually the hole that's in between, you can use it to sort of coat. I don't know if it's really co-witness, but you can use like G3s and HKs. You can actually look through and use the HK sights and pop up and use the red dots. So I'm actually a huge fan of those mounts. But it looks like you're running. Is that what's that light company that likes to post on Instagram?
That's a Surefire body with a mod light head.
Yes, mod lights.
Yes.
And you're running basically the regular tape plus button, a slate stop, which again does not really add much, by the way. So that helps you with your stability without the penalizing CAC broomstick.
Yes,
that I have so many of.
How many people thought this was 8 pounds 4 ounces? There was 0 in the chat who got it right, as far as I could tell. Maybe I missed it, but a lot of overs and a lot of unders too.
Let's see. Like I'm seeing a lot of like Actually, overs 9.5, 9.5. Wait, I'm trying to look for it. People keep on popping it in. Here's 10. Here's 8, 13, 7, 7. This is not an 11. That's another brother who uses the metric system
Now,
with me.
mind you, this is BCM's magnesium rail enlightened profile barrel, and it's still an 8.25 pound gun. And all it's got on it is just a basic white light and micro dot. And so again, when we think about and it's built off of an upper that was specifically set up to be lightweight. It was done with weight in mind specifically.
So to put this into perspective, though, an M16A2 is about that weight unloaded. So I think loaded is it's like somewhere between 8 and 9, somewhere like 8.5 pounds or so. Essentially, the M16A2. So unloaded is about, and these are unloaded weights, you said?
Yes, these are unloaded weights.
Can you go back for a sec? Go back for a second.
Mag in, but unloaded.
So you're adding, as far as, if you're looking at the concept of weight versus capability in this aspect, your M16A2 running iron sights with a sling is about that weight plus a little bit more, probably like closer to 8.5 instead of is that 8.25? 8.25, I guess. 4 ounces.
This is 8.25.
Yeah, 8.25. Okay. So you're looking you're looking at basically the same weight, but you don't have the red dot, you don't have the light with a tape switch, by the way. You don't have a suppressor mount, which that's not really a weight penalty, and you don't have the collapsible stock with a really nice cheek rest on it. With a backup iron sights that could be used in conjunction if your red dot sights fail, or you need to take a longer distance shot with proper elevation compensation. I don't know if those are CAC 600s, but they look like CAC 600s.
I think they're M-Bus Pros.
Okay, so they're not. So you cannot do that. But if you use CAC 600s, then you could do the 600 meter compensation. But so that, to put that into perspective, similar weight, but the capabilities that you see here with the red dot with a light and the sling obviously on it gives you those extra perks, which are much nicer to use if you were to clear like a cop infiltrator at 2100 at night, going through like dark corners of the fob. So anyways,
so another BCM setup, very similar setup, but with an LPVO. And mind you, the barrel profile on this is not their lightweight. So this is a standard BCM setup with LPVO. What say you now, Chad? What do you think this comes in at? Knowing that this one here was 8 pounds, 4 ounces, and remembering back, were you paying attention to the math we did earlier? How much is this coming in at?
I mean, this is a pretty typical setup. Let's say like a rancher in Texas would have something like this, like an LPVO. I mean, they would probably put like a streamlight or some type of weapon mounted light to hunt coyotes with at night. Just like spotlight pigs and coyotes, 16-inch barrel. Yeah, this is a very typical like American rural.
I mean, even
suburban,
honestly, like even suburban, like again, like we are calling it rural suburban crossover because again, this is like very reasonable to just be sort of like the standard American rifle here.
I know a lot of guys who would run a system like this just to hunt pigs with.
Yeah,
I mean, because it's very nice, and honestly, the AR is like pretty well balanced in this form to where like you could point it really, really quickly if you spot those lights at those eyes, because that's how you do it. You spot the spotlights and you see the eyes like reflect, and you blah 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 blah.
Bang.
Of course, now this is like throwback to you. You want to be able to positively ID the game before you drop those 77s, plop, 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 plop. So that's what you're looking at.
So there you go. 10 pounds, 4 ounces. We had somebody within 1 ounce that I saw. Very, very close. Very close. No, the 0.3. Yeah. Is that spot on? Almost exact. Exact. And yes, these are, again, like within context. I want you to think about this for a second. 9.5 pounds. 70+% of people said over 9.5 was too heavy. This is an extremely functional, usable, pointable, carryable gun.
Now, thick glass. So think of it if you used a lighter weight alternative to.
Yeah,
I
I
love the
mean,
razors.
this is the E model, so this is the newer one. It's only 22 ounces, only, or
Yeah.
22 ounces, I think it is.
Hmm.
Even the ultralight premium glass out there, like the PLXC, is still, I think, a 17 ounce. So it's 5 ounces, right? Basically, you're shaving. I think it's 5 ounces you're shaving off in
So
comparison.
0.3 pounds.
Yeah, basically. Yeah,
Okay.
basically. So yeah, I mean that could get you right into the just under 10 pound category, but it's still over 9.5, which again, like that to me, I think again, we lose people lose context very quickly when they're saying again over 9.5 pounds is just never okay. It's like, well, this shoots really, really nice and does not feel too heavy. How about the Ergy?
Thick. Well, that's not even thick. That's not even Block 2 FSP thick.
No, right? Like this is the modernized version. It's not quad rail, it's not block 2. This one here is your URGI setup. Mind you, this is like the to the nines setup. LPVO, inline dot, white light, and lamb. Where is this rating in terms of the weight profile? And Henry, we need to, while people are dropping their guesses in on this thing, do we tease how stinking
Oh man,
good
like
this
this thing
rifle
like
is?
smoke. We shot this on PA and it's just like smoked it. But let's just say that it tied with some that are like really up there.
Yes, absolute
Uh,
gas rifle.
but imagine like we're talking about this. Like, if you were to fantasize and maybe I don't know if it would be appropriate for this, but that rifle, if you used a heavier stock, so like adding more weight to it, but in the back,
Mm.
can you imagine how that rifle would feel?
I would definitely like, especially if you pop to the. So I specifically went with one of the M300 or the short bodies instead of the long full length lights.
Hmm.
Sounds kind of silly, but it's like it saves, like I think it's like 3 or 4 ounces, something like that, off the front of the gun.
Right.
Very similar performance profile, less battery life, but save some ounces on the front. If you don't have that, you don't have the lamb, and you go with a slightly heavier stock, which, to be fair, the B5 SOPMOD Enhanced, which is this one, is actually a pretty heavy stock. It's definitely not like a Mo stock or something like
Yeah.
that. The balance would be pretty insane. You would be able to one hand the gun for quite a bit.
Now, the light, you were saying that you went with a 300 series light. I wanted to add something that going from just like the Surefire, the CR123 battery. So this is like even nerdier because we're talking about like lights and not even the rifle. But like I was working with some Arasakas and comparing it to the CR123 battery, so like the camera disposable batteries versus the rechargeable 18560. Is that the correct term? Yeah, 18560s and the 18530s.
Yeah,
So
18650s, 18650s.
18650s and 18350s, I guess then.
I think that's what it is. Yeah. But
Okay,
the single cell versus the double cell.
correct. You shorten it and you do decrease the battery life in it, but you actually don't decrease the performance of the light when it's on the rifle with
Mhm.
that. So it's not
Oh
the
yeah,
best of
I
both
should be
worlds.
clear too. This is actually not the M300 body. This is the 18350
Yeah.
body. Yeah.
So you're not decreasing that light performance
Just
per se,
runtime. Just
but your
runtime.
runtime is decreased. Yeah.
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 So, all right, there I actually see somebody did get it,
Wait,
and
wait,
it
wait,
was
wait, wait.
10 pounds, 8 ounces.
He said 14, this one.
No, not the 14 pounds. Dear God.
He was
Uh,
12.
it
That's only
was,
10 and a half.
yeah,
That whole thing.
yeah.
How did they do that?
Well, it's a 14.5-inch gun, and there's no suppressor on this.
Ah, but it felt like maybe did the lamb system make it feel heavier when I was shooting it?
No, you were shooting it with a cam.
Oh, okay. That's what. Okay.
You had an extra pound on the front.
Yeah. So it goes back to the balance conversation that we were having. Like I forgot that I was shooting a suppressed. Yeah, that can definitely added quite a bit of weight to the end. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. How about this one? And this is one that is an interesting one. It's very purpose driven. It's a 300 blackout setup, but specifically for low light use, and we're calling it the Sentry gun, for obvious reasons. Where do you guys see this coming in at? This one happens to be a 10.5 inch, but 10.5 inch, 8.5 inch on the 300 blackout setups. Has the maul on it. That's a hefty chunk boy for the lamb.
So you're seeing like Josh is prioritizing this for nighttime use. 300 blackout, so low flash, lamb, the EOTech with a riser.
Yeah,
No
definitely
magnifier on the back.
for wearing night vision. Yes.
Yeah, you're firing this with night vision. Short, I mean, yeah, with 10.5 you can get away with 10.5 with 300 blackout without a lot of flash at night too.
Mm-hmm.
Decent guesses out
Yeah,
there.
people are honing in. They're starting to get a flavor
Like,
for the actual weights
let's see,
here.
8 pounds. This guy's going 11, 9 even. Look
There
at
it is. Boom.
Jeffrey.
Boom. Jeffrey. There you are, bud.
Yeah.
Yeah, 9.25 pounds.
Now, was that empty though?
Yes.
300 blackout.
A little heavier.
When you load it up, especially with subs, that's something that you need to also think about is ammunition weight, though. 300 blackout subsonics do not weigh the same as 55s.
True.
It feels like you've got a Magpul of 45s in there.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I mean, which is when you consider the difference between like 9mm and rifle ammunition, right?
Yeah, it's also another consideration. We've been talking about PDWs, the ammunition weight distribution between PDW cartridges like the 5.7 versus a 9mm like an MP5. It's just the rifle is one thing, but the weight that you're carrying around is also another thing. But anyways, let me see. This is the LSA, right?
Yeah, this is the LSA. The people already got it. They're already slamming it in here. Where do you guys think this one's at?
It's like 10. Oh God, you guys with the ounces. It's like 10.05. No. Fuck. I know I'm Asian too. Like
what?
This is so confusing to me. 13
and 8, Henry. 10
12
and
11. 11 pounds 8 was close to it.
Pretty close, within a quarter of a pound. Did
anyone get? Oh God, why? This is even next level of terrible.
No.
Hold
on. I need to what does that actually come out to? 9.2 pounds. So
yeah, no, that's a little bit far off. Do I see anyone with 11.4? We've got 11.8, 11.9, 11.9.
Close. These are all really close. I think if you're within half a pound or
this is 11.5.
Well, that's 11.8, right?
Yeah.
11 pounds, 8 ounces. So again, these are all within like a quarter of a pound, these are very, very good guesses. Rick says he did it. He nailed it. I don't see it. I don't see his original comment, but hey.
I can't. Well, this is Rick. Here we go. Good job.
All right, now you guys said we didn't do the What Would Stoner Do rifle. We put it in because you couldn't really have this conversation without looking at this.
Man, this is like, I feel like we need to do like a specific video just to look at, just purely looking at the weight and the balance of this rifle versus everything else, and the whole capability conversation, because like a lot of people are looking at the What Would Stoner and they're like, oh, that's a gamer rifle, like that's for USPSA, but like I mean, maybe it's for like the brutality matches. Yes, like yes, it is for the brutality matches for
Yeah.
what they're doing. So, but it's not a USPSA rifle. I mean, you tell them why it's not a USPSA rifle. Like you've got a whole spiel on this.
Yeah, I mean, well, it comes back to that conversation we had at the beginning of, or rather, the end of the actual weight assessments before we got into looking at the images. You want weight in a 3-gun rifle. At least I do. I do not believe or subscribe to the idea of an ultralight 3-gun rifle. I want some weight so that the gun doesn't move when I'm slamming shots, so that I can basically hold the gun up there and double tap targets out to 30, 40 yards and be able to just smack 2A zones with it, or run plate racks at 70, 50 to 100, call it. In addition to that, like a huge component of like the gamification of the AR, it used to be that people would look at the external features of the gun and go, it has an LPVO, it has a slick handguard, it has a muzzle brake of some sort, therefore it is a gamer gun. But the lines on the external features of the guns have blurred so radically. The only core pieces that really define a game gun are the internals. It's a lightweight bolt carrier and adjustable gas. And the idea behind this is you turn the gas down, you take weight out of the carrier. Weight out of the carrier means that the gun requires less gas to get the carrier moving. And therefore you can reduce the overall recoil impulse of the rifle, both perceived impulse, but also actual force coming back to you through the system. And obviously this gun doesn't do that.
Yeah. But I mean, it was designed for a different purpose from that. That's the whole point. Like I think people think anything that is new or trying to game certain systems is this is shocking with an optic. No light, but with an optic. And that is that lighter than a base rifle for a BCM?
If not, it's very close. It's comparable.
I mean, I could tell you this is lighter than a stock M4.
Yes.
Like a bone stock M4 is heavier than this setup. But I mean, people came close. Like, look, 7.27. Thank you for using the decimal system, guys. 7.7.
Yeah, like most of the average 16-inch guns, I don't think that it was. Are you sure this is lighter than a base M4?
It is.
Loaded or unloaded?
I don't know, like 7 pounds, I think is like what I remember.
Because most of the 16-inch guns that I was out, like that I found the averages on, were about 6.5 pounds.
Like with a CAC rail.
Okay, maybe you start adding rails, and then it's
okay. Like not XM4, Josh. I'm talking about M4, like not the 727, like actual M4.
Yeah, okay.
But like, I mean, people were pretty close to it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think some guys still drop back to the old the actual LPVO rifles, which to a certain extent it duplicates some of the, a lot of those things until the barrel heats up.
Yeah. And or you need to do other stuff with the gun, right? But if your general purpose is very specific in that you're just looking for white light and this, I mean, it's also a shooter, right? We only missed once on the range with it, if I recall.
Let me see. Yeah, people are just like not far off from it. But like the shocking thing is, you remember in the video I compared it to an M16, like the full size M16. It was like lighter than the M16 with an LPVO on it. But Jeff's rifle.
I'm just here to contrast that. I thought it was ironic to contrast this versus this.
Oh,
and
I mean, this is not to rag on Jeff. Like Jeff actually has a lot of time behind the Block 2, and he knows it's a very capable rifle. But compared to a bunch of other guys, like special operations guys who ended up becoming like gun tubers, Jeff is also very honest with his gear, because like when he was in, he was always a guy trying to push the envelope, seeing what he could do. Because like he's running an offset micro red dot. You see that? Like
Mm-hmm.
back in 2013, that was a new thing even to competition shooters, the offset red dot. And so he was already trying to push that overseas, going on missions with that to see how it worked. So Jeff is absolutely the type of guy who tries to push the envelope on some of this type of stuff.
I
But
mean, this is just intense, right? This is like when we talk about the kitchen sink. This is the kitchen sink setup where we're saying like there's a line that gets well, it's not. It doesn't have a bipod. Doesn't have a bipod.
but this
But
is close to your FSP that you had that you were
yeah,
that you put together, right?
but I was running an ACOG on it,
Now
right? So, like,
he also has his lam unit, his laser unit closer to the back, so
notice
he
that,
can
yeah.
prioritize a little bit more shooting comfort. But because the Taliban doesn't have night vision at this point, unfortunately, at this point,
I can't
frickin'
tell if
Mullen
he
has
has
night vision.
a white light on here or not on the other side of the gun or
But
not.
okay, like in 2013, the opponent did not have night vision in Afghanistan, so that splash off of your rifle, the IR splash,
It
may
just
not.
sucks for you. It
Well,
just
yeah,
sucks for you.
yeah, but
I'm not
like,
trying to shoot.
yeah, but it's not going to be detrimental on like lighting you up
Yeah.
because it splashed on you.
Right. Like, no, it just sucks for you if it splashes and then your night vision
Sure.
blows out from it. But this is one I actually we don't have an answer to. I know he has a clone of this, but it's not the exact same setup. Be interested if he jumps into the comments at any point on this video and tells us how much this actually weighed. But I would imagine that this is probably like a 12.5 pound gun based upon doing like the loose math on how much this stuff weighs. So
Let me see.
probably somewhere in the 12 pound 8 ounces area, maybe even slightly more than that.
This is what people are guessing.
I would imagine that this is a 14 5-inch gun. This is a block 2.
Yeah, like people, this is like well north of 12 that people are guessing. Like
Yeah. I mean, I think
this
that
right
that's
here, this is
probably,
unrealistic.
yeah, it's definitely not that.
Yeah. Let me hold on. I have some data from when we did practical accuracy on the block 2 FSP.
Yeah.
Let me pull that up on my off screen and I could tell you how much that the one
And
that
that
we
one, but that one had an ACOG. It did not have the VCOG. The VCOG is a chunky boy.
Oh, is it?
Yes. Yes.
Did you buy a VCOG?
No.
Let me see. Stand by. Almost there. Almost there. Nah, maybe no.
Yes, Delta. Everything we're doing in here is unloaded for the purposes of just keeping it consistent. And yeah, I think the VCOG is 28 ounces, which is again
Okay.
hefty boy.
All right. I
No.
can't find it.
That's okay, Henry. Now we're in the part of the session which is for you.
Yeah. So how much? Oh wait, no. Nobody said 13 pounds. This is like from a different one.
Yeah, that was from the other one.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I should not have flashed that. Guys, don't go on Wikipedia. Oh God, why monstrosities like this? So the FNC has a milled receiver, like the FAL. Then this one's the fixed stock version as well. It feels like a better balanced SIG 550, I would say. But let's see. Oh, yeah, some guys got pretty close. I mean, people were looking. Oh, yeah.
No Wikipedia, just the TISM. All right, the gun nerd is here.
Here,
boom.
He got it.
All right. So,
but
again,
I mean, people were guessing
setup.
around 8-ish.
Yeah,
8-ish,
and as a
which is what it
base
is.
setup, right? So when you contrast that against what was the M16, right? It's a 7-pound setup.
7-ish, yeah.
Yeah. So you change your baseline pretty dramatically. Like a pound difference at that weight is a lot.
Oh, sorry. A1 or A2?
Well, A1 is sub 7, right? It's 6.
No, A1 is about 7-ish. A2 is about 8, right on the 8.
Okay.
Depending on loaded or unloaded, though. Oh yes. Data Boris. We will ride.
Some of you wanted to talk about the AKs and how what AKs cost in terms of the weight capability breakdown.
Yeah,
And
so now remember when it comes to rifles like this, you have to pay the drip tax to play the game. All right. So this is a proper Russian 105 with a TDI, like old school TDI X47 chassis with an EOTech EXPS 3-4 with a magnifier, with a light, that's a Purst 3, not a Purst 4, by the way. So it's a big boy. It's the
it has the IR illuminator plus the laser.
Correct. With and even the vert grip, I'm using the RK4, and I know Tufu's out there somewhere. Cheers to Tufu for helping me find that thing. But you're not using 7.6239, so your ammunition is not as heavy. So good stuff right there.
Mind you, this is a 12-inch gun. This is an SBR,
13.1.
right? Okay,
13.1.
a 13-inch gun. Is it really 30? Was that with the flash hider or without?
No, the muzzle, the flash hider is detachable. So
yeah,
if you're
at the
calculating
muzzle, that's a
length,
13-inch gun.
Yeah, so if you take the flash hider off,
the
muzzle is
13-inch gun.
No, it's 13.1. If you want to get 8 inches, you will have a crank. Well, let's see, not that one. So let's see, 15 arshins. Like, damn you, that is a distance measurement from like the pre-Soviet era. We had guesses 9 pound 4 ounces. Like, definitely not.
Way under, gang.
This is actually how it feels like when you're shooting it. Came close.
Very close. Yeah, that's very close.
Close. 11.9. I mean, right there. Again, Arshan man. Mongo. I read Mongolia. 5 liters of vodka. Too damn much. And let's see, 3 handles of Stoli. Yeah, so the AK base system is like reliable because heavy is reliable and reliable is good. So 1 stone. Someone said earlier 1 stone is 14 pounds, and so therefore 2 M4s worth. So that's how I remembered that one now.
Nice.
But the issue, go back to the 105 first. The issue with the 105, if you look at that stock, I'm not running so if you ran the actual Russian aftermarket stock,
stocks.
like ran a Zenit stock, like the PT1s or something like that, that gets even heavier. However, it's actually easier to shoot with a heavier stock than this, because the standard stock that you see right here is super light. And so all your weight being up front, especially with that Purse 3 up there, with the RK4, with the light, and then with that huge chassis in the front, all of that weight, like balanced in the front, pulls it down whenever you're firing. Which, like, I don't know, like, it even, like, with AKs, it even, like, it's so taut, like, it kind of like teeters a little bit when you're in certain positions. So it's not an easy rifle to shoot, but as many will see later on, as we have been working on the 105 a fair bit, do not judge a book by its cover. It is actually exceedingly capable of a rifle. That 13.1 barrel length with 5.45, absolute chef's kiss. And shout out to Zach if he's ever out there. He's the one who did the conversion to finish that one off for me.
All right, Henry. Last one for our Guess the Weight series. Your SG551, the GIGN setup.
Yes. Another plagued with a drip tax. It's actually one of my. I mean, it's just like this is how illogical it is for me. I turned that into one of my standby rifles for reasons. I don't know why, but the drip is absolutely with this one.
Gigging.
Let's see the gigging.
Nice, guys.
Let's see, 1/5 of me or 2/3 weight of Swiss cheese.
Wait a minute. So what is the conversion of Henry's to Swiss cheese based off of this ratio?
Oh, you know what? Like, if you get me, you're gonna get 1/5 of a piece of bullshit. So that's not good, brother.
All right.
Hold on. Let me throw some actual weights out there before you start flashing these things, right? So 12-pound 8, 10-pound 3, 10-pound 1. Oh my. Okay, that's yikes. 3.5 cheese wheels. 1 gold bar of dubious origin. I mean, I can tell you as someone who funded that thing, yes, very much yes. And 4.5. This is great.
That's pretty close.
10 boxes of 10 boxes. Sheila Jackson Lee is out of our area too, by the way.
All right. There it is. The 1010.
Yeah. Now remember, this is a magnifier, red dot, no laser aiming module. And
quad rail, right? Or full rail system, weapon light.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic, guys.
Well, these oh my. Yes. But good lord. Yeah. It is actually fair. I mean, you've shot this thing as well.
Yeah, it's a good shooter. It is a good shooter for sure.
Of the SIGs, quite frankly, like I would prefer the 5.51 over the 5.53. That's just my personal opinion. Like there gets to a point where the barrel length, like you get too short. And there's a difference between like a 10.5 300 blackout versus a 10.5 5.56 when you're shooting it. A huge difference, in fact.
For sure.
But let's see. Yeah, I mean, like it's to me, I thought this was going to be heavier because I didn't know the weight until I weighed it. But like the 105, look at the weight disposition of this, right? You've got a sheet metal receiver, upper and lower. You're already running a long stroke gas piston system, which is heavier because of the piston and the gas stuff in the front. And your gas block is way chunkier than an AR's gas block. The light is all the way up front. I did use the shorter 18350 Arasaka, so yay, I saved a little bit of weight. But then I'm also running a red dot and a second prism in the back. Now, I ran my SIG 5.56, the green one, the American copy one. I was running an LPVO on top of that thing. And then I even stripped that to run a Comp M4. Because if we're here and we're talking about weight disposition, one of the cool things that I've really enjoyed using QD mounts, especially for prisms and flip to side magnifiers, is if you're able to clip them on and off. Especially like if you're running like a hollow optic in the front with a prism, being able to strip that weight lightens up the entire setup. It actually makes, like, if you're talking about your immediate engagement, your 0 to 3, you're favoring a lot more, let's say, comforts over capability. So you're basically subtracting capability to give yourself a little bit less weight and a little bit more comfort. Being able to QD stuff in this weight game is an absolute game changer. Now, people don't really QD lights anymore. However, I wonder why that is. Because like when I was in the military, we had those Surefire M951s that all had the QD mount in the like they had the QD levers in the front on the lights. Like that to me, like part of the upgrade package, we would get those lights and we would be able to quickly QD them because
Right.
before that you were using the what are those called? The ones with a SOPMOD package, the stream lights.
I know. Yeah.
The
Yeah. Yeah.
plastic
Yeah.
stream lights that look like pistol
Yes.
lights. Those were you had to use a coin to put those in, I think.
Hmm.
And then like when it came to my generation, you were using the flip off, the QD lights. Like I mean, I guess like nobody really removed the lights, right? So maybe that's a takeaway that QD mount adds more weight that nobody uses, whereas a magnifier, more people would QD it off to give yourself more and less capability if you needed.
Yeah. All right. So Henry, let's wrap up here. Right.
Okay.
Let's wrap up this specific session. What are and gang in the chat?
You get the reference.
I do. In the chat, go ahead and hit any of your questions. We'll spend a few minutes at the end of this thing answering some questions that come through. We had some super chats come through, Henry. We'll grab those first, and then I've got a few more minutes here, and we can wrap. Yeah.
Are there? I don't see any super chats.
Yeah, over this.
Here.
Yeah.
Did Canada get it right with a C7A2 and only hang the flashlight when they needed it? I know what the C7A2 is. I don't know what light setup they use.
Yeah, I don't either.
Let's see.
It looks like it's just configured without a light.
Oh, it's like the M16A2 with the C7 top.
Mm-hmm.
Or
and it looks like none of the configurations I'm looking at have lights set up on them.
Okay, so I presume just hanging off a light is kind of like Black Hawk Down style. You just clip a light to it.
Yeah, it looks like there's there's some Picatinny option up at the front of it.
So this is actually a good talking point. Like if you don't have night vision, you're not running nods or anything, and you don't have a huge budget to spend on something, you have an LPVO on a rifle, would it hurt to just clip, like Black Hawk Down style, clip a light onto the barrel and use the polymer handguards? I mean, I know that disgusts Josh, but it's an honest question whether it's worth it or not. Because when I was overseas with the A2, and I traded the A2 out, like as quickly as I got an M4, I traded the A2 out because we were running a lot of mounted stuff. I actually acquired, well, the NCOs and we acquired a bunch of old, like traded in M16A2 handguards to swap our Knights rails out, specifically just to shave weight that we didn't need to. So, I mean, if you're not running night vision, if you're not running a whole bunch of that other stuff, I mean, it's not like Instagram sexy to run the slick rails, that like polymer rails, I guess. But I don't think they're like entirely I don't think they're entirely useless, is what I'm trying to say. If what you're trying to do is just white light and magnified optic and sling.
Mm-hmm. I'm of the opinion, for any of my purposes, I've done too much of the work, even in 3-gun stuff in competition, which just sounds really ridiculous. But there are stages where you're shooting into a structure and you're outside. So there might be like a covered area on the range and it's shadowed inside that covered area. And the targets are extremely contrasted. It's a match. They're supposed to be easy to see and shoot. But depending on where the sun is, like if the sun is on the other side of that, coming down into you and you're up on target trying to shoot into a shaded area, it can be really, really hard to see into dark areas. And never mind when you're actually doing anything where you're training or working in in rooms or spaces from exterior to interior. And I think that's the thing. A lot of people think about white light in the context of it's dark out everywhere, and so I need a light. And it's not that always, right? There's other applications where it's you're in a lit area and there's something beyond in a passed into a dark area that you need to illuminate. And that's something
now,
that
to add to this though, civilian budget versus military or law enforcement budget's also different. Like if you're beholden to, like right here we're talking about the Canadian C7. Like I don't think they just, if they're doing what I think like Black Hawk style, hanging just a white light on it, I don't think they did that because they're trying to optimize, like, oh, let's give these soldiers less weight. So no, it's probably a budgetary issue as well. So like if you're like an Israeli soldier and you're running in, like some type of like an old Colt with, your slick polymer rails and they clip a light on the end, like that is a capable rifle itself. But like then it's a lot harder then to get into using other accessories if you really wanted to. Like it doesn't negate its capability just because it's using polymer rails, but it takes away from the possibilities of adding more stuff to it.
All right, Henry, I see another super chat here, and you're going to love this. Oh, this was a different one. Okay, no, I'll save the other one for a minute. So this is from Bunch of Crunch. Nothing heavier than a KSA Cricket single shot 22 LR is combat viable. ACOG optional. I love it. Yes.
Those are exceedingly light, especially with 22 LR.
Yes.
I think it's so. Just as a point of discussion or a mental exercise, 22 long rifle is useful, but it's not. But it has its limitations, and because it has those limitations, it negates you from doing certain things. Now, it is exceptionally quiet when you suppress 22. Within 100 meters, you are still extremely lethal with a 22 long rifle. But using that as your primary, like ammunition is also easy to carry. I guess.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that this was the max sarcasm.
Yeah. Okay. Anyways,
how about some person with? Yes, Henry, you did this to yourself.
Yeah,
you did it to yourself, Henry.
I need to work on the SPR, my version of the SPR. We'll work on it. I will not. I have some. I kind of have a form of SPR right now, but I want to do like drip SPR and then also an SPR that would be a lot more accessible to people. You actually like taking this semi seriously, because I think it's an interesting thought process on what can these special poverty rifles actually achieve. Like imagine pushing a PSA out to 1,000 with 77s.
I mean, we must do it, right? Mm-hmm. If we're gonna do it, we gotta go collect hits at 1,000 with it, right? Like,
of course. So, what is a Savage Bobcat? Is that a poor mannered feline?
Okay, here we go. Just Googling just Savage Bobcat came up with the wrong series of images.
Oh my. I thought, like, I was thinking Savage the right.
Yeah, Savage Arms, yes.
But then like Bobcats that's a Beretta. It's a pistol.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't even see this.
Yeah. But I mean, I would say like we do have a Bobcat and a Tomcat that we have been shooting with suppressors. The little.
Oh, that was the gun that I
like. Henry, I'm not supposed to call them like.
You're not supposed to call them.
pistols.
people enders. You're not supposed to call them people enders used by
They're
covert people and covert
yeah,
operations.
they're covert pistols. Yeah, what? Yeah,
I will say that shooting those was a blast, except I knew I was going to get slide bite doing it. And I was like, no,
hmm
just keep your thumb way down. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. And I shot a mag or two and it was fine. And then Henry was talking to me, telling me how to hold the gun to get a good shot for the video. And I returned to a standard firing grip and immediately slide
yeah.
slide
I
bite.
mean, those are honestly, they're like single. You have like that's actually a video idea for us to maybe delve into, like with small pocket pistols. Maybe shooting pocket pistols is a single-handed affair. Maybe that's just it. Like a
Yeah.
PPK, if you shoot it like the regular way, like it's just death to your web. It'll bite the living jeebies out of you. But when it was developed, that's how people were shooting them. They were shooting them with single hands. Let me see. Okay, this is a topic. Like you have law folders on your AR. What do you think about the ARs with the law folders?
Very, very purpose specific. Very purpose specific. I think for a while I was doing it because I thought it was like cool. Like I wanted it because it was like, oh yeah, now I have a 10.5. I can fold it up really tight. But what I realized, and we have a video coming on this. It's the mini SPR setup video.
Oh, look at this. Mm-hmm.
Where'd you go?
Sorry, I just had to open the door. My dog was stuck in here. I'm trying to go out and eat. The Urban SPR, the 12.5 SPR, the mini SPR.
Yeah, well, so two points, right? The law folder, to finish that commentary, we had it on a specific setup now where it's like we want it to fit into a certain size backpack. We want to be able to take it out and then be able to do something specific with it. Aside from that, I don't think that you want folders on just like a standard general purpose rifle. That's just me.
If you were to ask me, I would say bullpup, but okay.
Yeah. Now this is a brass facts comment, Henry. That last one that you just flashed up, the SPR, the Urban SPR.
Yeah.
Brock did a video on that recently. I actually agree with it wholeheartedly. His concept on it, it's like, yeah, you're not trying to push to 700 or 800, right? With your SPR,
Okay.
you're trying to push to 300 or 400. So do you really need an 18-inch gun? And it's like, well, we know what a 14.5 that's kitted out can do.
You can push it out to 800.
You can indeed.
All right. So this one, recommended optic for SCAR 17. That's all you, brother.
I love this question. The SCAR is already a lightweight setup, even when you have to put a bunch of additional rails and crap on the gun to make it like functionally capable with modern equipment. But a Night Force Attacker and the LPVO variety, like the 1 to 8s, very capable. But it depends on what you're trying to do with the gun here. If you're being weight conscious, the 1 to 8 is a great option. It's what we have currently configured on the 9-hole SCAR. And that gun, you shot it to 725 on the Speedway with a suppressor, and it was good to go. It was one of our very first Speedways, so we were still like learning how to do everything, to be honest. But very effective, especially the new ATACR reticles are beautiful.
Let me see.
Thank you, Greg.
Okay.
Well,
hold on. This one. I saw K Booty's comment. We're gonna get to that next, but like this one. Okay. I get that people want to have specific rifles for specific things. Like it's, like you're going to the beach, you're going to change into your, dive kit, whatever. There are places for specialized rifles, but it's just not realistic. Whether you're a law enforcement officer on duty, military as a soldier, or even, if you're talking about, as a civilian for a standby rifle. And again, the standby rifle is a concept unique to Americans. Like in Europe, it's like a standby club. But regardless, general purpose rifles are supposed to be a jack of all trades. It's supposed to be able to fill certain aspects of everything within reason. If you need a specialized rifle, if you need a, let's say, special poverty purpose rifle, you can build one of those out. That doesn't mean that you're going to roll around in your patrol car with an SPR all day.
Yeah.
So there's a use case for all. It's kind of like you have a daily driver, and then you have like you can have your fancy weekend car that you take out for fun.
I think that's the key here. What we have seen, and this is something that we covered in the Age of the SPR video to great extent. It was the entire premise of that. So I'd say it's still very relevant. You can go back and watch that live. I think it's the last live we did before this. That concept, the concept in that video is the 14 5-inch guns with an LPVO that you have now can do 90% of what you need to do really well across the entire spectrum. Are they as good as a 10.5-inch inside of a vehicle? No. Are they as good as a 18 or 20-inch gun with a 2 to 20 on it shooting at 1,000? No. But does it do everything in between like extremely well? Yes. And that's an interesting sort of, I would say, update of where we've seen things go based on technology and capability adjustment in the last 15 years or so.
So K Booty came back. He's talking about a Savage Rascal. Turns out it's a single shot, no magazine loaded 22 LR that Savage makes. He's saying that he uses that with night vision. I mean, 22 long rifle is a very capable cartridge, especially with night vision. People underestimate it because you actually have very low flash as well with 22 long rifle, especially if you suppress it. Even if you don't suppress it, shooting it through a 16-inch barrel, you don't have a lot of flash coming out of the muzzle on the back end. It's also very quiet compared to many other things. I would use at least something that is magazine fed. For a long time when I was in college, I had that Savage 22 rifle that I shot all the time. And it uses the little 5-round or 10-round magazines. The Savage system for 22 is fantastic. I've shot a lot of rounds through that thing. But if I had to choose, I would choose a mag-fed rifle, obviously, to give myself more capability. But a single shot doesn't mean it's bad. Let's see. Yep. We had Brad crept back on. He had bad internet, but check us out. Well, just give me a call later on. I'll text him later on. Let's see.
Interesting question from Dr. Squirrel and the supers.
Okay.
The 416s are stinking heavy.
Yeah, so this is something that Josh, well, mainly I, because I am what you would call a Heckler und Koch crack fiend. I have considered the 416 many times. In fact, Josh knows, like every few months, he'll get a message from me. Hey, dude, like I'm thinking about like this 416 clone. Like it goes from like, hey, check out this like CAG 416, and then it goes like, hey, check out this Norwegian 416 November. Like it looks super cool. But then like it always comes back to the times whenever we tested the 416. It's super front heavy. And then if you use the factory gas block, it's made to punch through all of that grit. And so 5.56 feels more like a 300 blackout. Super, to be honest, like in my opinion. I like the idea of a 416, but I think if I were to get that gas system, I would go back to the G36. At the very least, like the recoil is very similar, but the G36 has less weight to it in the front. So it makes adding capability like this a lot easier. So I like the G36.
Oh, goodness.
Do we have... I felt like we had someone... like anything else, or...
No, I think that's probably a good place to wrap. In total conclusion to the entire weight conversation, right? The balance comes down to, if you go back and watch the concepts of this that we've laid out, that you guys participated in communicating through, your configuration is relevant, right? And we can say that there's a standard configuration that works well for us, that hits 90% of the situations that we're going to use the gun for. And then understanding how the weight applies to that is where we ultimately need to go from that. But the idea of a hard and fast number being the indicator on what does and doesn't make sense is where we get dumb, right? Like, that's where it's stupid. That's where you're applying arbitrary nonsense, for lack of a better term, into a conversation that has to be far more nuanced than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, again, like, this is a topic that we're specifically wrapping around a general purpose rifle. Like, we talked about heavy being an advantage, but in terms of a general purpose rifle, as general as it can be, of course, tailoring it to your specific location. If you live in the prairies, you may be using an LPVO, versus if us bouncing in the suburbs, you're looking at both CQB and, down the streets, maybe you would go with a red dot magnifier instead, or EOTech magnifier. I mean, those are the smaller configuration things where I don't know if it's worth like us delving into this. I almost feel like there's this argument, like LPVO versus, well, there is this argument. I don't feel like it. There is this argument, LPVO versus red dot plus magnifier, but it's not like versus. It's more like a Venn diagram. Like, they both do the same things in the middle, but they also have characteristics that make them great. You could be more flexible with weight on one side. You could be more flexible with distance on the other. So I think the weight itself should be almost seen as a currency for capability, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than rather than saying, oh, this is too heavy. No, that weight means you can shoot in the dark with a suppressor. Like, that's pretty rad if you actually need it. So
right.
That's my thought.
Equally, if you don't own night vision, don't put a lamb on your gun.
I own night vision, Josh.
I know what Henry's going to go get.
I own my dual tube night vision that is just as good as any other dual tube. So, baby, ladies, gentlemen, I am in fact a dual tube night vision owner.
Max strip, Henry. Max
You're
strip.
welcome. Yeah.
All right, y'all. Thank you so much. If you're still here hanging out with us and having a good time, drop a final like. And until next time, we'll see you on the range.
See you guys. All right. I need to do the end.
716, this is 096, 4 Vic, 8 packs, Redcon 1, green to green. How copy, over?
096, this is 716, roger, over. 16, 091, 1 pack, green, green, over. This is 716, roger, over.
16, 2, 1 Victor, 2 packs, Redcon